Hello, I'm Michelle Westlander-Quaid of Google, and I'm happy to welcome you to our Public Sector Developer Series. Today's topic is App Engine, and our speaker is Todd Reedy. And I'm going to turn it over to Todd to get started.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Todd Reedy. I'm one of the Federal Systems Engineers covering our cloud platform technologies. Today, we'll just go through a brief overview of Google App Engine and how it can help you and your customers develop more efficiently and rapidly and bring solutions to your customers at lower costs in quicker time. So just to get a level set, we'll start out with some of the different definitions of what cloud computing is. Start out with what not cloud computing is your typical packaged software. So you can think of everything that you have to do to run any type of application, especially a web application. So you need to purchase and allocate networking devices, storage devices, and servers. Then you might use some virtualization software, or you may not, but you'd have to manage that. You'd also have to manage your operating system as well as any driver updates, patches to that, and then you start adding your application stack. So that might include some middleware, some runtime environments, and then you finally get to what your application's supposed to do, as well as adding your data. So you have to manage that entire stack from bare metal all the way to bits. When we talk about cloud computing, and you can see this is our focus today, is what Google can provide. It ranges from infrastructure as a service all the way up to software as a service. So starting with infrastructure as a service, you at least don't have to manage your networking gear, your storage, and your servers, and the virtualization layer. That's all provided for you and managed typically by someone else, in this case, Google. But what you do have to manage still is your operating system, any middleware, and your applications and data. So you're responsible for manually or programmatically doing scaling, load balancing, failovers, COOP type implementations, and things like that. When you move up a layer into platform as a service, a lot of the headache is removed out of the picture. So no longer are you having to patch your operating system or update drivers or worry about security updates for the underlying system. Now all you have to worry about is you're building your application and managing the data that goes along with it. Removes a lot of the chore and headache. So now you don't have to over-provision or under-provision hardware. It's just worry about your application and make it work. Lastly, at the top of the stack is software as a service. You really don't manage anything. You just use what's given to you. This is great if you don't need control or custom applications, and it really eliminates all of the headache, and you just use what you're given, and you don't have to manage it. So if you want to see cloud computing as, famous Gartner sees it, there's different layers in Google Apps. So you can think of Gmail, Google Drive, and different application suites like that, as well as Salesforce.com. That's a software as a service, and web filings. Different examples there of what software as a service is. Then moving back down the stack, platform as a service. Our focus today, which is Google App Engine, fits right into there, as long as things like Windows, Azure, Amazon Elastic Beanstalk, and a lot of others. Then what people are most familiar with, at least with cloud computing, or when they think cloud computing, is the infrastructure as a piece. So clearly Amazon EC2 is up there, but we also have components within the Google Cloud Platform as well, mainly cloud storage and compute engine. If we look specifically at what the Google Cloud Platform is, we typically think of it as three pillars of compute services. So you have compute, so data processing, crunching numbers, serving up your application. So there's two services there. Compute engine, which again is our infrastructure as a piece, your typical virtual machines. And then we also have App Engine, platform as a service. And all of these pieces that you see on this slide can be used interchangeably with each other. You can use bits of each one, or you can use the entire thing put together. So we also have different cloud storage offerings. So cloud storage is a bucket-based object store where you can store huge amounts of data, almost infinite amounts of data. Then we have Cloud SQL, which is a hosted relational database. Cloud Data Store, which is actually the back-end data store to Google App Engine. We've now separated that out as a separate service that you can use from any application. And then persistent disk, which goes along with our Google Compute Engine. And lastly, we have what I consider to be the frosting and the sprinkles on the cake, the app services. So BigQuery allows you to analyze terabytes and millions and billions of rows of data within seconds. Cloud Endpoints is an innovative feature that allows you to develop mobile and web applications simply by tying into your back-end code by using JSON and RESTful APIs. And then we have other services that go along to more specifically App Engine, like caching and queues. We'll probably hit on a few of those today, but those will also be other topics in upcoming developer series talks. So why would you use App Engine? Well, I briefly touched on you just focus on your application and managing your data. That's it. So it's a fully managed platform, and you can focus on your code, and you don't have to worry about scalability, building your infrastructure, updating your infrastructure. That's the key to this. With App Engine, you also get familiar development environments. So if you're familiar with Eclipse, or you use your favorite text editor, it could be Sublime, could be Notepad++, it could be whatever you're used to using. You can use that with Google App Engine on the development side, and then you just push it up into the Google Cloud Platform into App Engine. And last but not least, I can't stress this enough, is automatic scaling. So you only use what you need. This allows you to, the supply and demand curve are almost always the same, and so you're not over-allocated and paying for what you're not using, and you're not under-allocated and not serving the needs of your users. So to list off a few of the App Engine features, we do support popular programming languages. At this time, it's 4 different languages, so Java and Python are fully supported, and Go is in a preview state, and PHP has just moved out of limited preview into preview, which just means anyone can now use PHP to develop their web applications on Google App Engine. And as you saw in a previous slide, we have a lot of different storage options. So you pick and choose what fits best for your application among the 4 choices there. Services. I'm going to talk about that in a second, but there's a ton of services that you can use to help rapidly develop your application. We talked about the data store and auto-scaling. Another really nice feature that's great for developers and test teams is the versioning and traffic splitting. What this means is, let's say I make some changes to my code. Maybe it's a visual difference, or maybe it's a performance feature that I've added. Well, I want to test this out and see if users really appreciate the performance, or if it's making it worse, or if there's something I was missing. So what I can do is I can upload a new version and deploy that new version on Google App Engine, and have only a percentage of my users hit that new version. So you could do A/B testing to see if things are going well, or if you should roll back the change. And lastly, I talked about local developer tools, and this also includes third-party frameworks and extensions that are fairly common to a lot of the programming languages. So let's take an example of a currently running Google App Engine application. So there's a real-time earthquake monitor hosted on Google App Engine, but developed by NIAD, which is a public sector in Japan. So what happens there is that you'll see an image, and I'll show this in a second, of seismic sensors reporting back data of the acceleration of the Earth. Typically, you can see up to 20,000 concurrent users, and because the average they throttle the average request to every 2-second updates of an image, you'll see about 10,000 requests per second. And this is at peak. So, you know, something like the Fukushima disaster on March 11th of 2011. And I'll show you this as well in the video. So if we take a look at the demo, here's the actual application running. So my Japanese is a little rusty, as in non-existent. So the great thing about using Chrome is you have the ability to tap into the Translate API, and it provides this automatically for you. So I just click Translate. Now I get to see in English what this application is doing. So I'm going to check the automatically update every 2-second box. And let's get to the local one here, update to the latest. Okay. And so you can see every 2 seconds I pull a new image. So some of these dots are changing from dark blue to light blue, maybe green and yellow, but not a whole lot going on right now, thankfully. But this isn't really, I mean, that's interesting from a user's perspective, but how did this look on March 11th of 2011? So if I go here, we'll start the video, and at about 8 seconds in, you'll start to notice a large yellow, orange, and red radial expansion of the shockwave. So this goes out, and you can see this is time-lapse. It's sped up, but it lasted quite a while. So this is videos on YouTube. You can search for it and find it pretty easily if you'd like to view it yourself. And the same thing with the application here. You can play with that yourself. But how is this implemented? Well, if we look at a couple different things here. First, NIAD at the time, all their sensor data goes to their data centers. And they take all that information and then create an image file every second. Now, they could do this at their own data center, or now they could use even Google Compute Engine to do this processing for them and provide a flexible infrastructure as a service as well. In either case, every second, NIAD pushes that image to Google App Engine. So Google App Engine is constantly taking these hundreds of kilobytes and maybe even megabyte files and ingesting them and putting them in the data store. And every 2 seconds, someone's getting another image. But in reality, someone's getting an image every second. So this is a lot of processing, and especially at peak power, or at peak user, you couldn't really scale for. It's a very spiky graph of usage. The nice thing about Google App Engine is I didn't have to over-provision for their usage. It just scaled up to meet their needs. And when the catastrophe was done, Google App Engine reduced the number of instances to scale back down and not use what they weren't using. So how would this look like as a request? Well, if I'm the user on the far left-hand side, I make a request to the website, and that runs through my local ISP. That, in a local data center, hits what's called the Google front end. All traffic to Google runs through a Google front end. This is traffic from Gmail, from Google Search, from YouTube, any of our services. You're going to hit a Google front end. Now, the nice thing about Google front ends is that the edge cache is capable of reducing the time it takes to get information to the user. So in this case, the images might be cached for a couple of seconds so that a user will get it instantaneously. Now, if it's not there, the request is then sent to one of Google's data centers over Google's own fiber, so it's a really quick response with low latency. And what will happen is that request will hit a Google App Engine front end. Now, this is completely different than the Google front end, as it's responsible for distributing the request to the appropriate services. In this case, the App Engine front end would either distribute it to a static server, which handles things like CSS files, static HTML files, or images. The other possibility is that it's a request for dynamic information. And this is where Google App Engine front end would request the information from an app server. And basically, an app server is responsible for creating multiple instances of your application as the requests ramp up. So if I have one request coming in every second or so, or maybe every half second, maybe all I need is one App Engine application instance. Now, if I get 10,000 at a time, it depends on how much code is involved, but maybe I can handle this with 100 instances. But this is all handled dynamically by the app master and the app servers. So if we look a little bit deeper here, we'll see how this actually works a little bit more in detail. So the request comes in, it hits the Google front end that we talk about, and that request might be either taken care of by a cached response, or it might be routed to the app servers we talked about. Now, the app server can do a lot of things, and your instance of your application might actually access the data store, or memcache, or images API, or the user API. We've got tons of different APIs you can use to help implement your application quickly. But what happens there is these are shared services. So your app server and your application make a remote procedure call, an RPC call, to the data store API. And this is all transparent to the user, and as well as to the developers. You just make calls to these services. Or it might make a request to the memcache. So that request goes out to the service within Google's infrastructure. The results are returned to the app server. The application instance does its processing on that data. It reads or writes data, it manipulates images, it gets data from other services, and then all that is returned in your response in the reverse order of where the arrows came. So there's a whole lot going on in a few milliseconds. And what's great about this is it's all automatically scaled for you. So as I said, there's a lot of services in APIs. I believe there's about 35 to 40 just listed on this page. So you can, and these are all, you can use them. They're optional. You can use bits and pieces of each one. It just depends on what you need for your application. And these are all well documented on our public site as well. So I've told you about all the great things that App Engine can do. But there are some caveats to being able to have this speed and scalability and reliability. So one of the things is you can't write to the file system. This is for the protection of everyone, Google, other users, even yourself at times. So there's a lot of ways around this. You can use the data store. That's the predominant method. You can use cloud storage, Cloud SQL. You've got a lot of different options there. So writing to the file system isn't that big of a deal. We don't allow any OS calls. I mean, that's just strictly forbidden, again, for security. There's plenty of libraries you can use to do a lot of different things. And if you really do need to do operating-specific calls, it might be that your application is more designed for something like Google Compute Engine. There's a rarely hit limitation, but there is a limit that I thought you should be aware of, and it's on the number of indices in a data store. And this primarily occurs when you have a lot of attributes to your data, and you need to sort them, or combinations of sorting and querying. Again, this is in the hundreds of number of indices, but sometimes it happens. Now, if you're a Python developer, there's a lot of libraries out there that you can use, but there are some that are built on C or C++ code, and you can't use those. So it has to be pure Python, or Python built on, or libraries built on pure Python. And the similar caveat is true with Java. So with Java, you have applications that have to use whitelisted classes or libraries, or things that derive from them. So there's documentation on which libraries you can and can't use, but it's quite extensive. There's just a handful of libraries that don't work. Lastly, front ends and the requests, they have to respond to the user within 60 seconds. Okay, well, that seems like an awfully short time, and for a lot of applications, 60 seconds is too short. So that's just for front-end requests. There's a lot of ways to work around this. we have another mechanism called task queues. And there are two different types. There's a push task queue, and what happens there is you put information about a task on a push task queue, and App Engine will pick that up for you, and with one of the services you write will complete the task. There's a service you write, it sees a task, it handles it, and you've got up to 10 minutes to handle that queue. So you can do things asynchronously. This might be for some simple analysis of incoming requests. It might be some image processing. It might be a lot of different things. Then we have pull tasks, and these you can use backends or pretty much anything else to reduce the queue. So you put tasks on there, so you can have a Google App Engine backend process this task. You can use any programming language. You can even use your laptop with some Python code to pull a task from a pull task queue and process it there, and then return the results back to the task queue. And these can take as long as you want, basically an indefinite amount of time. So there's a lot of ways to get around the 60-second limit for front-end responses. So we've talked a lot about it, and we've seen a little bit of an App Engine application. So now I'm going to run you through some of the console and what that looks like, and actually go in, look at some code. You don't have to be developers. I'm not really going to change any code or look at anything in depth, but I'm going to show how you would change a few settings and then deploy your own application. So if we look at the Cloud Console, I already have a couple of existing projects, and just to give you fair warning here, this demo is going to be very similar to a cooking show. I'm going to talk about something, I'm going to start doing it, I'm going to put it in the oven, and in 30 seconds it's going to be ready. Some of this is a little bit of trivial tasks that are just a little tedious for a one-time setup that I didn't want to spend a whole lot of time here going through. So we will create a project though. We'll call this my first proj. And you can choose your own project ID and see if it's available, or you can have the random generator create a project ID. I think Proven Gasket 378 sounds perfectly fine for my first project. So I'm going to create this, and in a few seconds we're going to have a new project that I can click into and see all the services. So I've got this overview, and we've now added this nice welcome feature where you can basically get started by deploying sample apps, and we're going to do this. So in this case, we're going to look at the photo feed Java sample app. Normally I'd click this and it would be deployed to App Engine automatically for me, or for the mobile backend starter, either one. So, but I'm going to look around at the Cloud Console a little bit. So I've got APIs that I can use. So there's a ton of different APIs that we have available for you to use with App Engine in your application. We'll go through here. There's permissions where you can add users and roles and groups to who is an owner and can edit the code or who might be users. Your billing is just what it sounds like. This is where you enter your billing information. Then we can go to the App Engine. App Engine currently has a separate console, but it's linked to here right here, as well as Compute Engine, Cloud Storage, and all of the other services I talked about as well. So if I were to click into App Engine, and again, here's the putting the turkey part in the oven. I've got a project already set up with a lot of this information. So if we were to look at this App Engine, and this is more interesting because I also have information on usage, so you can see my current requests per second and errors per second and things like that. So if I look at this demo application, I'm currently looking at the version, so I only have one version in there, and this was the default one that I deployed when I hit deploy in the welcome screen. But if I go to the dashboard, I can see a lot of different things. I can see my quota that I've used, so I'm used about 9.5 hours of my 28 hours instance hours a day. So this is a free application at this point. I haven't migrated it to a paid or a premier application. So in theory, we give you enough resources that you could handle a low to moderately trafficked website and run it for free on Google App Engine. Now, if you get a lot of users or a lot of data, you'll need to move to a paid version. But you can get to all the information here. So we've got logs. You can see the requests that come in. I have a cron job set up to clean out old images. I was looking at the versions before and things like that. Instances is another interesting thing to look at. So you can actually see how many instances of your application are running. In this case, I only have one, and that's all I need because I'm really not getting any usage out of my application yet. When you get more and more users and applications take longer to process, App Engine will spin up new instances for you, and this will be listed here. So we can also look at the data in the data store viewer. And you can see different users. And you'll see here there'll be different photos and things like that, and those are all viewable here as well. And then there's a lot of administrative settings and billing settings you can have in App Engine too. So if I go back to the Cloud Console and I went and I clicked on the photo feed sample app, I'm presented with a lot of different information. Basically, I could look at the documentation for it. I can get the SDK and the project files. So I've done all this already. I've downloaded the SDK. I've downloaded the project files. And I've unzipped these, and it's ready to go. So if this is my the unzipped source files. So you can see I've got a source directory, in this case because it's a Java App Engine app. I've got a WAR directory as well, a web archive directory. And this holds all the information, the bytecode, the images, the CSS, HTML, whatever you have for your web application. All that's copied into that directory structure from your source when you build it. You'll notice that I filled in some of the information already that's specific to my development environment, right, including the application ID that this belongs into. But I've also have this application version. So I'm going to change this so I can actually see a second version. So I'll call this one Live Demo. I'll save that. So we've got all this great stuff here, and now I'm going to go to my command line. Now, typically when you work with a Java application, you can use the Eclipse plugin, but I wanted to show you, the worst case scenario here, and it really isn't that bad. So if I go into my photo sharing demo directory where all this code is, you'll see I have a couple directories that just match what I showed you in my text editor. So in this case, I'm going to use Ant. I've got Ant pre-installed, and this project came with a build.xml file. So what I can do is just run Ant, and I believe it's run server, and this will give me, first thing it'll do is compile the code for me. The next thing it'll do is run a development application server. So I can test and develop my own application on my own laptop or workstation. So I'm going to go, and let me tab back to that. It actually tells me where this is at, so I can just copy and paste it. So, and this can vary from environment to environment. So it's asking me to log in because in my code I've told it that I need any user who uses this application to be logged in. In this case, this is a stub out login on my development server, so I can just log in as pretty much anybody. So you see I've been developing and working on this. I logged in as a different user earlier and uploaded a nice image. And as a different user, I can say, oh, nice picture. And I can post a comment on that. Great. So that's there. That's running. I can upload my own images. That'd be a nice place to be today. And so that's now uploaded. So I'm testing my own application, not on Google infrastructure right yet, but on my local test environment. Now, I see it's working pretty much as I expected it to. So what I'm going to do is go back to my command line. I'm going to Control-C out of this. It's going to shut down the development server. Now I'm going to deploy this, and in this particular case, the command is ant update. There are command line tools that come with the Java SDK. One's called appconfig, appcfg, and the other one is dev server. And appconfig would be the tool underlying this build rule that would actually update the environment. So I'm going to hit that, and remember we changed the version number to be live demo, and that wasn't there before. So hopefully this pushes here, and it did. Now we're waiting for the new version of the application to be deployed, and as soon as that comes in, all right, good. So it uploaded. Now we should be able to go back to our App Engine dashboard here and see what's going on. So the dashboard doesn't really tell us anything, but the instances, we're still at one instance, and version. Now we see the live demo. And by default, this one isn't running. Now I can actually go to that one, and there's different ways of accessing it. So by default, if I were to go to my application ID.appspot.com, you would see this is version number 1. Now, if I wanted to try the other one, the other version I just uploaded, it's got its own subdomain, own host name. So it'd be live demo in this case, single-purpose-307. And so it'll look pretty much the same. Now you notice the pictures are different. I uploaded different pictures to the actual production environment. But that's what would happen. And if you made any changes, you would see the difference between the different versions. So in a nutshell, that's it, other than the hard part of actually developing your application. And that's what at least your developers can focus on. So we've got a couple more slides, and then I'll be ready to take questions. All right, so we'll go back here. Slides. So for those who are related to U.S. government or any type of government within the United States, and you're concerned with where your data is, currently App Engine allows you to have the choice of storing your data in the EU or the U.S. And so for most people who are probably watching this, you're concerned mostly with it being physically within the CONUS, and that's definitely true. Now, some of you may be familiar with our Google Apps for Government offering. Google App Engine is not in that environment, but it's not a lost cause, and I'll tell you why in a second. It's because we now have FSMA Moderate covering Google App Engine, as well as our entire Google Apps suite. So, so we have FSMA Moderate as well as these other certifications. So the former SAS 70, which is now SSAE 16. ISO 27001, which is security related, I believe, environmental, and as well as work safety for data centers. So we've got all these different types of certifications. And you're probably asking, well, how much does it cost? Well, like I said, you can actually run a pretty moderate application for free if you wanted to. You do need to enable billing if you consume all your quota, and you can do this with a credit card, or you can contact your local sales rep to help you. It is billed monthly, and you only pay for what you use. So if you use 15 minutes of an instance, you get paid for that. Now, there are certain startup fees for new instances, and those are well documented in our cost structure, but basically you have a 15-minute startup fee, and then whatever you use on top of that. We have what's called Premier accounts, and so those provide you support, and there are different levels of support as well, as a 99.95 SLA on Google App Engine. You can get a discount on front-end instance hours, and you can get a billing by invoice as well. Plus, if you start really developing on Google App Engine, you can have an unlimited number of apps as well. So where do I get help? Well, if you're doing this without support, the best place to go is our documentation. That'd be the first place, and that's at developers.google.com/app engine. The next place I go is to Stack Overflow. We have a very active community over there under the Google App Engine tag. And I'm there occasionally. A lot of our engineers are there answering questions. Most likely, especially when you're first starting out, if you have a question, it's probably already been answered on Stack Overflow. It's a great resource. We also have the Google Developers YouTube channel. This loads of information there, and this is where you'll find videos from I/O, deep dive topics from App Engine to Compute Engine to all of our services. We also have a cloud playground where you can try some of these APIs without having to get into full-blown application development. And if you're needing help, I'd suggest look to some of our partners, and these are listed on our cloud.google.com/partners site. In fact, you might be one of them, but we've got a lot of partners that can help. And again, I highly recommend our Premier Support. We've really got some bright, talented support engineers that can help with your various issues. And there's different levels there. So everyone gets bronze support. This really isn't Premier, but basically if you have billing issues, this is where you go. Silver, you can submit tickets with things that may be broken. Gold and up, you start getting more and more services like consultative services, as well as even with Platinum, the possibility of a TAM as well. So if you need to figure out what's going on with App Engine, if you think something's wrong with App Engine, I'd suggest looking at our App Engine status board. Great way to find out what typical latency is, our uptime, and what services are working or something's going on. So in the future, we've got a few topics that we had in mind. If you would like to suggest more, please add them to the questions in this Hangout on air, and we'd be glad to consider them for future sessions. So lastly, do we have any questions yet?
Well, Todd, I think you covered all of the questions we got from the community in advance. So being we don't have any new ones that have popped up, I think that's a wrap.
All right, thank you very much. Hope this helped everyone, and see you next time.